Good to be here. Good to see some familiar faces. First of all, I just want to start by saying, anytime you're asked to return to a place that you helped build, you had a hand in.
What if everything you heard about the Indiana Fever's coaching crisis was completely, deliberately wrong? A story exploded across social media, claiming Stephanie White had resigned from the Indiana Fever, and that Caitlin Clark was the reason. It spread to hundreds of thousands of people in hours. Fans panicked. Comments sections erupted. The narrative wrote itself. The most famous woman in basketball had already driven a respected coach right out the door. But here's the thing. Not a single word of that story was true. And the real story, the one nobody is actually telling you, is so much more layered, more explosive, and more relevant to what is happening in women's basketball right now that it makes that original rumor look like a warm-up act. Before we get into it, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. This channel breaks down the stories the mainstream media glosses over. And trust me, you're going to want to be here for everything that comes next. Let's set the scene. Sometime in 2024 and into early 2025, a claim started circulating online with the kind of momentum that only truly scandalous content achieves. The story: Stephanie White had resigned as head coach of the Indiana Fever, and the pressure surrounding Caitlin Clark had pushed her out. Various posts and videos presented this as breaking news, citing unnamed insider sources and blurry screenshots of alleged statements. Each share added a new detail. Each repost made it feel more legitimate. By the time it had reached its peak, millions of people were operating under the assumption that the Indiana Fever were in absolute freefall, a franchise being consumed alive by its own superstar. The reason this rumor gained so much traction wasn't just because people love drama. It was because the surrounding circumstances made it feel plausible. The Fever were in turmoil. There was a massive coaching change. Caitlin Clark was at the center of everything. The rumor didn't come out of nowhere. It was built on a foundation of real chaos. Someone just mixed up the timeline, swapped out the names, and let the internet do the rest of the work. And what happened next? Almost no one went back to verify the actual facts. To understand why this rumor hit so hard, you need to understand who Stephanie White actually is and what her relationship with the Indiana Fever really looks like, because it is genuinely one of the most interesting stories in the entire league. White is an Indiana native. She bleeds Hoosier basketball. She played college ball at Purdue, became a WNBA player, and eventually transitioned into coaching. She took over as head coach of the Indiana Fever back in 2014, and in her very first season, she led them all the way to the WNBA finals. That is not a small thing. That is a legendary debut. But after 2 seasons, she made a calculated move. She stepped away from the professional ranks to take a head coaching job in college, chasing a different kind of challenge. Eventually, she landed at the Connecticut Sun, where she built a powerhouse program and earned WNBA Coach of the Year honors in 2023. Her reputation in the league was bulletproof. She was regarded as one of the sharpest, most disciplined coaches in women's basketball. A builder, a strategist, someone who could take raw talent and turn it into something cohesive and dangerous. So when the Indiana Fever came calling again in November 2024, it wasn't just a hire. It was a homecoming. And the circumstances surrounding that homecoming, that is where things get genuinely fascinating. Because here is the truth that the resignation rumor conveniently buried. Stephanie White did not resign from the Indiana Fever. She was hired by the Indiana Fever, and the coach who actually left was Christy Sides. Sides had been at the helm through one of the most chaotic and historically unprecedented stretches in sports history. She inherited a rebuilding project, and then overnight, everything changed when the Fever landed the #1 pick in the 2024 draft and selected Caitlin Clark, the most talked about, most scrutinized, most marketed female athlete the sport had ever seen. Sides went from running a quiet rebuild to managing a global circus. Every timeout she called was dissected on national television. Every lineup decision was debated by millions of people who had never watched a WNBA game before Clark arrived. She finished the 2024 season at 20 wins and 20 losses, a playoff berth for the first time since 2016, which should have been celebrated as genuine progress. Instead, the narrative pushed by media and social media alike was that the team underperformed, that Sides couldn't handle the moment, and that a superstar of Clark's caliber deserved something more. Whether that criticism was fair is a separate conversation entirely. But the outcome was the same. Christy Sides was out, and Stephanie White was in. The rumor had the bones of a real story. It just had the wrong coach, the wrong direction, and frankly the wrong entire premise. Now, here is where the real drama picks up, and it involves Caitlin Clark's 2025 season, which turned into something nobody predicted and almost nobody has fully reckoned with. Going into 2025, the expectations were astronomical. New coach, returning superstar, a franchise with its sights firmly set on a championship run. The hype machine was fully operational, and the Fever were positioned as must-watch television for the entire sports world. And then everything started to fall apart, not because of drama in the front office, not because of locker room meltdowns, but because of injuries. Caitlin Clark played just 13 games in the 2025 season. 13. A right groin sprain, quad issues, an ankle bone bruise. She went down in July against the Connecticut Sun in Boston and didn't come back. The most anticipated second season in WNBA history was over before it really began. What makes this even more remarkable is what Stephanie White did without her. She kept the Fever competitive. She kept them focused. Indiana finished 2025 with a 24-20 record and made the deepest playoff run the franchise had seen in a decade, reaching the semifinals before bowing out to the eventual champion Las Vegas Aces in 5 games. The Fever also won the Commissioner's Cup title that year, the first in franchise history. That is the story the resignation rumor was burying. Not a franchise in collapse, not a coach being forced out, a franchise that was actually being rebuilt, this time correctly, even in the middle of a medical crisis involving its biggest star. But let's not pretend it was all smooth sailing, because it genuinely was not. The locker room issues that started bubbling up during the Christy Sides era didn't just disappear when White walked in. In June of 2025, with Clark sidelined by her groin injury, the Fever dropped an 85-75 loss to the Los Angeles Sparks at home. And afterward, guard Sophie Cunningham said something that sent shockwaves through the basketball world. She admitted that players on the team had been forming their own islands, essentially acknowledging that cohesion was broken, that the locker room was fragmented, and that the team hadn't yet figured out how to function as a true unit. That phrase, own islands, landed like a bomb. It confirmed what a lot of people had been quietly sensing watching the team play, that despite the talent on the roster, despite the star power, despite the coaching upgrade, something underneath was still not right. Cunningham was honest enough to take partial blame herself, which at least showed some self-awareness. But the damage was done. The narrative of a divided locker room was now on the record, in the players' own words. And that division wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was being amplified by something happening at the very top of the entire league. A controversy that made the Fever's internal struggles look like a minor subplot in a much bigger war. Here is a story that genuinely shook the WNBA establishment and barely got the attention it deserved outside of hardcore basketball circles. In October 2025, Nafisa Collier, the WNBA Players Association vice president and one of the most respected players in the league, stepped in front of media and delivered a statement that amounted to a direct attack on league commissioner Kathy Engelbert. Collier claimed that in a private conversation about salary concerns and the league's future, Engelbert had told Caitlin Clark that she should be grateful for the platform the WNBA provides her. Let that sink in for a second. The commissioner of the league allegedly telling its most marketable, most revenue-generating player that she should feel grateful at a moment when that player's presence had demonstrably transformed attendance figures, television ratings, endorsement interest, and cultural relevance across the entire sport. The optics were catastrophic. Sophie Cunningham, never one to hold back, went public with her reaction and called Engelbert a delusional leader. The choice of words was blunt and unfiltered, but it reflected a sentiment that had clearly been building among players and their advocates for quite some time. The controversy exposed a deep fault line between the league's administration and its players. A tension over credit, compensation, and power that the Clark era had brought to a boiling head. Because here is the uncomfortable truth at the center of all of it. The Clark effect had done more for WNBA visibility in 2 years than the league had managed in the previous decade, and not everyone in a position of authority seemed ready to acknowledge that honestly. And if you have been following this channel for a while, drop a comment below. Do you think the WNBA handled the Caitlin Clark era correctly? Because the conversation in the comments is always one of the best parts of these videos. Now fast forward to where things stand in 2026, And for the first time in a while, the story coming out of Indianapolis is genuinely optimistic, with some serious asterisks attached. Caitlin Clark spent 8 months away from competitive basketball, 8 months of rehab, of mental battles, of watching her team compete without her while she rehabbed the groin injury that ended her sophomore season early. She described the mental side of the recovery as its own challenge, almost as difficult as the physical work. But in March of 2026, she returned to game action with USA Basketball in the FIBA World Cup qualifying tournament, playing her first competitive minutes since July 2025. And the early signs were exactly what Fever fans have been desperate to see. By the time the 2026 WNBA season opened in May, Clark had declared herself 100% healthy at training camp. "I feel great," she said. "Super excited to be back here. I think I have a great perspective on camp and not taking anything for granted." Stephanie White, entering her second season as head coach, laid out a clear vision for what she wanted from Clark and the team, emphasizing smart, disciplined basketball rather than the chaotic, high-wire act that had defined some of the team's lowest moments. And the financial picture around Clark in 2026 tells its own story about just how transformative her presence has been. After earning less than $80,000 as a rookie, a number that remains one of the most discussed inequities in professional sports, Clark's salary for 2026 jumped to approximately $530,000 following the new collective bargaining agreement. Projections suggest she is on track for a $1.3 million salary by 2027 and potentially a $1.7 million Supermax contract by 2028. The Clark effect didn't just change how people watched women's basketball. It changed the financial architecture of the entire league. On May 9th, in the very first game of the 2026 season, Clark recorded 20 points, 7 assists, and 5 rebounds against Paige Buchers and the Dallas Wings, and became the fastest player in WNBA history to reach 1,000 career points, 250 rebounds, and 250 assists. She left the bench twice for back treatment. She returned both times. The message was clear. She was not going anywhere. So let's bring it all the way back to where we started. That viral rumor, that shocking headline, that story claiming Stephanie White had resigned because of Caitlin Clark. It was fiction. Clean, deliberate, convincingly packaged fiction. Stephanie White did not resign from the Fever. Christy Sides was let go after a genuinely difficult season managing an impossible situation. White was brought in as the upgrade, a proven winner returning home to finish what she started a decade ago. The Fever didn't crumble under the Clark era. They survived their worst possible outcome, losing their star for most of the season, and still made the semifinals. But the fact that the rumors spread so widely and that so many people believed it without questioning it for even a moment tells you something important. It tells you that the pressure surrounding this franchise is so intense, the stakes so impossibly high, and the scrutiny so relentless that almost any story of chaos or collapse feels immediately believable. The Indiana Fever exists at the intersection of athletic ambition, cultural transformation, financial revolution, and institutional resistance. And that is a combination that generates more heat than almost any organization in professional sports right now. The question going into 2026 is not whether the drama is real. The drama is absolutely real. The question is whether Stephanie White, Caitlin Clark, and a locker room that has shown real cracks can finally channel all of that pressure into something that wins a championship. Because if they do, it won't just be a title for Indiana. It will be a defining moment for the entire sport. And if they don't, well, you know where to find the breakdown. If you made it this far, do yourself a favor and hit subscribe. New videos drop regularly, and the Fever story is nowhere close to being over. See you in the next one.